Good morning, everybody. It's 10 o'clock and it's time for me to open this hearing session for the examination. My name is Krista Masters, an inspector appointed by the Secretary of State under Section 20 of the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act 2004 to carry out the independent examination of the Eastleigh local plan. You will have all spoken to Louise St John Howe, the Programme Officer for the examination dealing with administrative matters. She's acting as an independent Programme Officer during the examination and is your first point of contact if you have any queries about the procedures for today or the examination generally. Today's event is being recorded by the local authority and then will be made available for viewing as a recorded event after today's session. I would like to now go through the names of those participating in today's session and check they are online and can hear me. Could I have those from the council in the first instance, please, if you'd unmute yourself and turn your camera on to introduce yourself and then remute and turn it off. Good morning, Mr. Tuck.
Morning, Graham Tuck, Planning Policy Team Leader for the Council.
My name is Paul Stinchcombe, Queen's Counsel, also for the Council.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning, Inspector. Nick Pincombe from Urban Edge Environmental Consulting, advising the Council on ecological matters.
Good morning.
We have two more. Oh yeah.
Sorry, I'm Callie Sparks. I'm the Sustainable Transport Planner for Eastleigh Borough Council.
Good morning.
Morning, Chris Payne. I've been doing some financial work on feasibility, but I'm actually project director for the council's One Horton Heath scheme.
Okay, and can I just clarify, Mr. Tuck, nobody else speaking on behalf of the council today?
No, that's correct. No one else.
Thank you. And then I have Mr. Packer. Are you online?
Yes, good morning. Good morning, Ma'am. Yes, Simon Packer from Turley on behalf of Marina Developments Limited. And I don't believe that there is anybody else speaking on behalf of Marina Developments Limited, but you will be aware from Louise that Christy Roger from Marina Developments Limited is available should you have any specific questions about the operation itself from a technical perspective.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Coombs.
Good morning, Michael Coombs, representing Hamilton Council.
Thank you. Okay, and unless I hear to the contrary, anybody else who is logged in is observing and not participating. Okay, thank you. Could I ask that everybody keeps their cameras off and muted unless you are speaking and participating in the session? Thank you very much for that. I'd like to welcome you all warmly and thank you for participating. Some will be more familiar than others with virtual events and the use of Teams. The hearing will run in a very similar way to the physical hearings which have already taken place, but there will be some necessary adjustments and we'll need to adapt and make allowances accordingly. In terms of today's session, there have been two separate guidance notes issued, both of which explain more about the hearing session and in particular the detailed nature of how the event will be run virtually. I will now briefly set out a short background to the context of today's additional hearing. Following the hearing sessions which ended in January 2020, I wrote to the Council in April 2020 setting out a number of concerns regarding the local plan and requesting that additional evidence be prepared. The Council have responded to these concerns and prepared main modifications accordingly. However, the Council also requested to submit additional evidence in relation to Policy HA2. This additional information has been accepted, and in light of this additional evidence, I have decided it is necessary for a further hearing to be held. This will allow this information to be examined and afford representers the opportunity to comment accordingly. In the context of the policy itself, the Council agrees that the hotel is not viable on the site, and for the reasons set out in my letter of 13th of May 2020, that's examination document ED 73, the policy should not be deleted. This is the starting point for today's hearing session. As a result, the following matter will be the sole focus for the discussion at the meeting. At today's hearing, what modifications are necessary to policy HA2 to ensure it is justified and effective? I've produced an agenda based on my original matters and issues paper and in light of the statements received from the Council and others. I will be going through a series of questions and asking the Council and others to contribute as appropriate. Everyone will be given the opportunity an adequate opportunity to speak if they wish to do so. If you wish to speak on any particular issue, you should use the raise the hand tool, and I will bring you into the discussion. The first time you speak, it might be helpful if you could state your name again. And after you have spoken, please ensure you mute your microphone and turn your camera off. I will normally only go around participants once on each question unless we need to explore something in more detail. So please ensure you say what you need to say at the right time. There won't be any interruptions, cross-examination or cross-table discussions. And 3 further key points to make, please. We will not be using the screen sharing facility. Please do not hold any documents up to the camera, and the chat facility in Teams must not be used under any circumstances. I anticipate that the session will only be required for the morning only. However, dependent upon discussions, we may have a short break. Does anybody have any questions regarding how the session will be run or the virtual nature of the event? You can either unmute yourself and turn your camera on or use the raise hand function. No, okay. Can I just clarify with the Council then who is leading the discussion on your behalf?
That's myself, Ma'am.
Thank you. Okay. And I should also just make you aware that I have a secondary screen here with most of the documents on, so that's why I will be looking to the right-hand side for most of the session. So could you, we haven't received any additional documents, have we? I know that there was talk of maybe something additional coming from the Hampshire's Highways Authority.
Ma'am, we have the appendix to the council statement, which is the statement from County Council. That's the only statement we're expecting from the County Council, which was submitted as of the deadline before Christmas.
Yeah. Okay, but nothing in addition.
No.
Okay. So what I want to clarify in the first instance is the site area and how we've arrived at what's in the statement of common ground in terms of the site area. In terms of the policy allocation itself.
Is that a question for myself?
Yes, it can be, yeah.
Well, I think it can be answered in 2 ways. There's one is simply a factual point about the different site hectareages depending on which site area we're talking about. But the differences between the council and MDL in terms of what the site area should be are essentially whether it should include the field to the west, which is known as the Chamberlain Field, I believe, and also the mound, which is the sink to the southeast, and also I believe yes, a small area into Badman Copse as well. So unless Mr. Packer wants to clarify, I think, where the differences between us.
Right. So have you got the policies, the submission policies map to hand, and the change that was proposed? I'm trying to, yeah, I'm trying to understand what is the council's current position on the site area. Because obviously we've got the site area in the Regulation 19 version at 4.7, and then in the when we sat in the previous hearing session, you were looking to reduce that down to 2.3. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we had the representative who's present today talking about extending the site area, and I'm obviously then mindful of the I think it's the amended main modification to the policies map that you put forward at ED 36A, and then what you've stated in your statement of common ground.
That's right. I'll answer on the without prejudice basis, but just on the outset, as this is a public meeting, I do need to make it clear that the council's position remains. We've heard what you've said today. The council's position remains that we consider the policy should be deleted, and therefore the site should be deleted, and you have all the reasons for that set out in our statement. So I think it's important to make that point, and we hope that can still be considered. You have all the evidence before you.
Yeah.
So with that having said, on a without prejudice basis, our position would be to keep the boundary effectively as it is on the submission plan. So that's I think we can ignore what we were talking about at the proposed modifications in July 2019, which is a reduced area. So I think the starting point for from our perspective on the without prejudice basis remains as is in the submission plan. It's perhaps just helpful to clarify there was two different ways that site boundary could have been measured. One was the area excluding the DM20 boatyard allocation, which was around about 4.7, I think, hectares. But if you include the whole yellow line area on the submission plan, it's more like 6 point something hectares as set out in the statement of common ground. I have no view as to which, to my mind, it probably makes more sense that it's the whole yellow area, which is the 6 point. So I'm just getting the statement of common ground up, but I think it's 6 point something hectares, which is the whole yellow area. But the 11 point something hectares is the wider site, which MDL are promoting.
So I'm just trying to find the policies map extract myself. So as shown on the submission policies map, HA2 correlates with the 4.7 in the Regulation 19 plan.
Yes, that 4.7 is excluding the DM20 site. If you measure the whole yellow site boundary, it's 6 point something or other hectares. But we've left it as 4.7 hectares in the in the statement of common ground, or at least our version of it.
Yeah.
It's 6.9 hectares if it was the whole yellow boundary.
Sorry, I'm getting quite a lot of background noise on here. If you're not speaking, could I just ask that you mute yourself, please? Okay, so the 4.7, and then the 6, it's 6.9 as you've put in your statement of common ground if you're including the DM20 land.
That's right, yes.
Okay. Thanks for clarifying that. Okay, if you just got to hand the matters issues, the matters issues and questions which were issued. I don't think there's anything particular I would like to cover on 1 or 2, unless anybody has anything that they would like to add on those points. Please use the raise hand function if you do. The statements of common ground, then, as set out in 3, is what you've prepared, and you've gone through their various modifications that are agreed and that you disagree with between yourselves. So we'll perhaps come back to that at a later point. On point number 4, is there anything in particular that the council would like to raise in relation to point 4, over and above what you've set out within your statement?
So if you could just bear with me, my screen's hopefully temporarily frozen. Yeah, I'm just getting down to it now. I think any, I mean, you've got what it says in our statement. There are some differences in wording between us, which we think it would be useful to explore. So we can either do that, which is set out in the statement of common ground. We can either do that now or further on. I think we'll just make the general point now that part of those differences relate to our concerns that, for understandable operational reasons, for running a marina or a leisure hub, it will be difficult to fully achieve the enhancements which are being suggested by MDL.
Right, so let's come back to that as we look at the specific wording of the. I mean, if we take a step back on this, Mr. Tuck, I've accepted the point that you're making about deleting the policy, so that's accepted. What are the council trying to achieve by having this allocation in the plan?
Well, again, I mean, taking a step back to submission, what we were trying to achieve at that stage was a hotel and a range of benefits which could be delivered along that. Now, we've accepted that a hotel was no demand for that, and therefore it wouldn't happen in itself, and it wouldn't equally deliver the benefits. From our perspective, and I'll try and say focus on the without prejudice approach, but from our perspective, we're very concerned that the planning balance changes if we're introducing residential, because residential has different travel characteristics, not least it's occupied by children who will go to school, people who will use a health centre, and possibly more so people using a rail station than a hotel. So we have a very strong concern around the unsafe and unsustainable access between the site and those facilities. So, I mean, we see the planning balance as leading to deletion, but in terms of the without prejudice approach, we would like to at least achieve those issues being fully addressed. And if they can't be fully addressed, that is both the sorting out the access issues with the footpath and the cycleway, but also ensuring that all the benefits being suggested are actually delivered. And we have concerns that they can't all be delivered for viability and operational reasons. On a without prejudice basis, we're seeking to at least ensure the policy secures all the things that development would need to address to realise the benefits and sort out the disbenefits.
Okay. Mr. Packer, do you have any thing to add in, or any comments on what the policy is looking to achieve? And then I think the most straightforward thing then is to just go through the statement of common ground wording.
Yeah, it is. I guess if I can make a general point to start with, which Mr. Tucker's referred to, which relates to this argument that the council are now putting forward in respect of overall planning balance. If we're looking at soundness, then it's important that one of the key principles, obviously, and one of the tests of soundness is to be positively prepared. The plan is to be positively prepared. I don't see how a deletion in this instance is in any way positive. There are a number of elements within the policy as submitted, which have been carried forward from previous plans as well, that we're seeking to deliver specific benefits. And perhaps more significantly, as you've alluded to as well, Ma'am, in your various correspondence, there is the plan has a strategy which seeks to exploit the positive aspects of the marina and heritage aspects of Hamble Peninsula and Hamble in particular, and indeed the benefits of recreational activity associated with exploiting the coastline. Now, these are key aspects of the plan. These can be delivered with a mixed-use scheme that incorporates some residential, as you'll be aware. So I think this point about the planning balance, we need to remind ourselves that the strategy of the plan, some of the key principles of the plan, are indeed orientated around exactly what is being proposed through the amendments that my client is seeking. So I think I'll probably say that as a general point to start with before we get into the specifics.
Sorry, thank you for that, Mr. Tuck.
Thank you, Ma'am. Just a brief response and focusing on the without prejudice version. The strategy for the parish, which you've rightly referred to in your letters, it takes a balanced approach itself. Mr. Packer correctly recognises the marine benefits of the marine approach, the maximising marine characteristics of the area. It also recognises that strategy in the local plan for the parish, also fully recognises the traffic problems on the peninsula, including in Satchel Lane. So that's why we see there is a planning balance to be struck here, and that very much plays out in characteristics of the site. And I mean, I see the without prejudice version as taking a positive approach. It's taking a positive approach to address the issues, both the potential opportunities for enhancements, but also the positive need to address transport and travel issues to ensure a safe and sustainable access. Thank you.
Mark, just coming back on the point that Mr. Tuck's made about the disbenefits, if I can describe them as that, which relates to, I believe, principally sustainability and accessibility. There's a wider point here that I think you've alluded to, Ma'am, in your post-hearing session letter, which relates to the Hamble Peninsula generally and the justification for the limitation for strategic scale development in the Hamble Peninsula, and what evidence the council has produced to effectively come to this conclusion that there's clearly some missing elements there. So, there's that wider context as to what are the issues, where is the transport evidence that suggests that there is a significant issue when we know that there are planned improvements to key junctions within the Hamble Peninsula to assist in relieving any congestion issues. And with a proportional approach in mind, my client would not have specific concerns about providing a contribution towards those improvements. So, what is the extent of the harm, I suppose, that or the disbenefits that Mr. Tuck is alluding to? Again, we can run through these more specifically if when we work our way through the statement of common ground, if needed. But again, I just make that as a general point.
Okay. Mr. Tuck, do you want to? I'd quite like to hear from Mr. Coombs actually before we get into the detail of the statements of common ground. But is there anything else you'd like to add on that, Mr. Tuck?
Yeah, just briefly. This isn't an issue around the council's position back in whenever it was 2015 about no strategic growth in Hamble. We fully accept your letter on that point. We don't see this as a strategic development. The issue here is twofold. One is a very specific issue with Satchel Lane and the local circumstances of Satchel Lane, which are fully set out in our statement and indeed fully reflected in the facts on the ground for the characteristics of that lane running up to the school. But also there has been a change as well in that the County Council has now have a policy of objecting to any development on the Hamble Peninsula, at least until any traffic improvements on the Northern Hamble Lane are implemented. So that is a change in position, which is more recent from the Highway Authority. Thank you.
Okay, sorry, Mr. Tuck. When you say, I noticed that you said that in your statements as well. They've got a policy of objecting to. When you say what they've actually adopted a policy, what?
Yeah, in March 2019, they took a report to their Environment and Transport. I believe it's to their Cabinet lead for Environment and Transport. It's the report that we've reproduced in ED 80 in Appendix, I think it's Appendix 2. And that report, it sets out the improvements and results of consultation, but the key bit here is that they adopted a policy through that report of, or their policy approach approved in that report was to object to any further development along Hamble Lane, effectively anything feeding into Hamble Lane, at least until that transport improvement at the northern end of Hamble Lane is funded and implemented. Their concern, as set out in that report, is that improvement is really to address existing problems. There's limited opportunity for further improvements after this. So at the very least, they're looking to not support any development until that's been implemented and they can see how it's actually panning out on the ground. There is actually a big funding gap still at the moment. They've got a funding bid in, which they're awaiting results on. But if that were implemented, they would still want to see how that bedded down.
Okay, so it's a policy that they took to a committee and adopted a subsequent policy after that. Or are you saying they took to committee and recommended an approach that they would object to any further applications? Because your statement says there's now a specific policy.
I don't know. I mean, I think it's more the second way you describe it. So they have an approved approach at their committee to object to any further development, and indeed we're seeing that come through in their comments on other planning applications in the area.
Okay. Might be helpful just in the context of what you said at the outset about what the objectives of the policy were originally in terms of the hotel, which I think we've all accepted is not a viable part of the policy, but the range of other benefits, and perhaps hear from Mr. Coombs.
Good morning, Michael Coombs.
Hi there.
Again.
Sorry, Mr. Coombs,
yeah.
Can I just clarify? Have you seen the policy, the statements of common ground that's been prepared?
I haven't. I've seen ED 80.
Yeah.
The council's the plan. I haven't seen a statement of common ground. No.
Okay. If you could just give me your overall comments then in terms of how the policy is worded in the version that you commented on previously, the Regulation 19 version.
Yeah. So from Hamble Seascape's point of view, we provide water-based activities and various activities for local people within Hamble and the surrounding area. With regards to comments on the previous plan, basically you observed in the previous plan that we would not be protected under the previous HA2 plan, and that it ceased to allow us protection for access to the water and for our facilities down at the marina.
Mm-hmm.
And would effectively be possible to remove us from that site. We're looking to obviously safeguard our facilities down there, and to allow us water access.
Okay. So that's the priority, is it?
Yeah, that's the priority for us. Yes.
Okay.
And then obviously on the second point that we made was with regards to the Mdl proposal. I wasn't myself, but Mr. Dyke spoke to Mdl, and obviously looking at the redevelopment of the area, because currently our site down at Mercury Marina is quite let's say in need of some redevelopment, and we could do with better facilities in order to provide great opportunities for the young people of the area.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll come back to you if there's any further points, if I may. Thank you. So Mr. Tuck, in terms of those, the sort of the additional, I'm trying to remember how you phrased it now, the range of other benefits to be delivered alongside the hotel. Are those the range of other benefits the policy context was set around originally?
Yes, that's one example of, I mean, broadly speaking, it's what we just heard about with the community benefits and the ski scouts. It's the environmental enhancements, the potential for those, and the, if you like, the Mdl enhancements, the marina restaurant and the potential for marine employment. So, I mean, I think our case is around some concern about whether all of that can be delivered for various reasons. But therefore, without prejudice version, trying to put it straightforwardly, nail it down so that we're clear what benefits should be secured from the scheme.
Yeah. Okay. So in a sense, then 3 specific areas.
Yes, I think I've covered everything. I mean, it's all as set out in the policy. So the community benefits, the ecology, and then the direct marine, be it the leisure marine or the marine economy benefits. And yeah, there's some access issues and access benefits as well.
Okay. Have you got your Appendix 3 to hand? I think it's the appendix to the Statements of Common Ground.
Yes, I'm just getting it up now. Yeah.
And I'm looking in particular at the points that are made at Appendix 3. I think it's page 20. What was said there about policy DM 20.
Yeah.
So DM20 relates to boat yards and marinas only.
Yeah.
And you've got a clause there about development or redevelopment incorporating a modest amount of floor space not restricted to boat related uses, and then you're suggesting that's existing text, and then you're suggesting an additional short paragraph at the end there that would say existing water sports training facilities within these sites should be retained unless it can be demonstrated to the council's satisfaction that they are no longer needed by the community. So how does that sit with what we've just heard in terms of the enhancement of those facilities?
Well, it doesn't cover that point. Perhaps the first thing to say is the DM20 proposal from the council would apply in a scenario where HA2 were deleted, and it was in that scenario simply trying to protect the Sea Scouts' existing position. But if we're referring to a without prejudice HA2 version, that has within it both from our wording and MDL's a reference, I believe, to retaining and enhancing the community facilities. I'm just trying to find the right criterion, but yeah, it's criterion 4. So the site retains and enhances the marine and related uses, including marine employment, sailing, canoe, training facilities, etc., etc. So in that sense, with the without prejudice version, there isn't really a need for the DM20 edition. The DM20 edition is under the scenario where HA2 were to be deleted, and it was seeking to provide some reassurance to the Sea Scouts with regard to their existing operation.
Right, okay.
Sorry, Mum, I don't know whether you wanted me to comment on this particular element. I'm just conscious that
if you've got any comments, then now's the time to make.
I think it's a fairly obvious one, to be honest with you. It's just obviously there is an opportunity to provide enhanced facilities for the Sea Scouts. It's embraced within the objectives of what MDL are trying to achieve as part of the modifications to the policy, and the reality is that the funding necessary to deliver those benefits can only be secured, in our view, through providing for some residential development as part of a mixed-use scheme. So you've heard from the Sea Scouts, it is an important facility. It does need enhancing and upgrading. This can be delivered as part of these modifications that we're putting forward.
Could I just?
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, one way around the original question of DM20 is simply to add the word enhanced as well as retain to that new section in DM20. I mean, on the broader point, I think we probably all agreed. I understand Mr. Coombs' point that there is an opportunity and a need to enhance the Sea Scout facilities from what I've seen of them. I understand that point. I just slightly question Mr. Packer's point. Yes, clearly 75 dwellings is going to provide some kind of financial assistance. There's a lot of the things to address on the site, and we're concerned that it's not going to be able to address all of them in terms of financial viability, but be that as it may, we recognise 75 dwellings will be of some use there. But I just question it's the only way of securing that. Sea Scouts have been able to get very successfully raised £80,000 in 2014 for another building, and we've also had examples elsewhere, for example, of the Borough Council through New Homes funding, funding Scout and Guide buildings, for example, in Chandler's Ford, as we've set out in our statement. So just to question a bit the suggestion that that's the only way it could be achieved.
Okay.
Sorry, just a point on that. That I mean, yes, of course, there are avenues to explore funding for these facilities, but there can't be any guarantee that that they're going to be secured. I mean, obviously, within the remit of the modifications that we're putting forward here, there would be a policy that provided that the delivery could take place for these improvements. So it provides that certainty.
So can I just clarify then, in terms of DM2 and this paragraph you have there about exceptionally development or redevelopment, what's envisaged by that?
Sorry, is this the DM20, the edition of the last? Oh no,
No,
sorry.
I'm trying to understand. Yeah, it is still on DM20. Yeah.
Well, I know from history of working at Eastleigh that phrase has been in the plan from at least the last adopted plan, which is obviously going back quite a way now. That was at the time, that was a discussion around generally for marinas in the borough, in other words, in the Hamble area, wanting some flexibility, that it wasn't purely everything had to be a boatyard, everything had to be direct marine employment. They were looking for effectively some commercial flexibility to allow some cafes or restaurants or some kind of value generation which would sit well with a marina and would help retain viable marinas in the Hamble Peninsula. So that's been a long-standing policy recognition of an appropriateness an appropriateness for some form of flexibility for a modest amount of other floor space, rather than saying that these large sites should all be absolutely marine employment and nothing else. Just a bit of flexibility to secure the ongoing future of all marinas in the borough.
Right, and that's what's explained at 5.105, isn't it? That approach.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. Yeah, just trying to get that.
It's page 110.
Yeah, that's right. Yes.
Yeah. So that's recognising then that in certain circumstances other uses might be appropriate. I'm just wondering, I'm not finding the statement of common ground or uncommon ground version that you've prepared together particularly helpful, because I think you're both of the main parties here are still quite some way apart from each other. So I'm just wondering, and thinking a bit out loud, whether some sort of wording that you've got in DM20 along those lines might be more appropriate for HA to be mirrored in HA2. Has that something that either of you considered?
From my perspective, not directly, but if it was very similar wording, modest flexibility, then I think that's something the council would be content with, because it's simply mirroring the approach that we have already. What we're concerned about is the 75 dwellings, but some modest flexibility around in fact, it's really just ensuring that DM20 applies to that site, which in a way it does already. It might be that the DM20 designation needs to be slightly enlarged, but that could be a way forward, and then that policy with that flexibility in it would apply to that site.
Right, sorry, no, I'm still thinking along the lines of retaining policy HA2.
Yeah.
But introducing that wording into HA2.
So I think potentially that could be a way forward, because that to my mind is different to what HA2 without prejudice is saying, because it's referring, the DM20 approach is referring to a modest amount of floor space. So that is potentially a way forward, but it doesn't. Our position against residential remains, but in terms of our flexibility for other uses, that DM20 flexibility incorporated into HA2, I don't think the council would have a problem with that.
Okay, Mr. Packer, I can probably preempt what you're going to say, but I'd like to hear from you anyway.
Yes, I think. I mean, clearly, the strong preference from MDL's perspective is to retain HA2 with the specific reference to residential development. I think the view is, as you'll see from the various representations that have been submitted, in our view, that will deliver the benefits, the specific benefits that the council were seeking as part of the original submitted version of the plan, which are listed in the Statement of Common Ground. But there's a wider, I think, again, a wider point here about really what the redevelopment will provide, which is a comprehensive approach to the site, delivering improved facilities for the marina environment, and it's that collective really that's important. So it's regenerating this site in a way that is compatible with the strategy of the plan, appreciating the comments that have been made by the council about residential development, which again we'll come on to. But that, I think, is best achieved through a specific policy that does seek to deliver residential development. So you're getting regeneration, you're getting an improved environment, you're getting benefits to ecology, which the council recognise, you're getting benefits to heritage in terms of the setting of the conservation area, you're getting improved recreational access to the coastline. So that, I think, to deliver that properly and comprehensively and in a collective fashion is best achieved through a specific HA2 policy that provides for residential development.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Packer. I would like to go through the wording as set out in Appendix 3, and I've noted the comments that you've both just made there. How is everybody with the screen time? Would you like a short break before we do that? Any views at all?
I don't mind either way. Happy to carry on, but I'm entirely at the mercy of others, really.
Exactly the same view, Mum.
Okay, we'll carry on then. So if you can turn up the Appendix 3, that's the best place to be looking at this, is it, in terms of the wording that you've come up with between you?
Yes, I think it is.
Yeah, page 16.
Anything in square brackets is where we're disagreeing, and then Appendix 4 sets out that disagreement in a bit more detail, but Appendix 3 is the best starting point.
Okay. Can I just clarify this point about planning application to be accompanied by development brief and master plan?
Yeah, from my perspective, I actually think this is a fairly minor difference between us. I think we're agreed it should be accompanied by a master plan. The council, in addition, is seeking development brief. This may just be an issue around terminology. I just want to ensure that, I mean, I think it's agreed, but it's certainly the council's position that any design of, this is a sensitive landscape. That's not an in principle objection. It's simply that at the planning application stage, design will be a key issue. That will be a key consideration. And by master plan and development brief, we mean a detailed design document setting out from master plan layout, but also the detailed design criteria to address that site. So that's what we're seeking to achieve. So I'm not too concerned whether it's, I mean, another way could be to say a detailed master plan and just briefly set out in supporting text what we mean by detailed master plan. But I'm not sure this is a major point. We just want to recognise that care is going to need to be taken with a thoughtful approach.
Okay. I'm trying to cast my mind back to a year ago and what we said on other sites, but there was, I think from memory, there was a general view that you should be having a consistent approach to the terminology there. Do you recall the same?
Not as such, but that certainly sounds a sensible approach. I'm not entirely sure what our consistent approach is, but I agree.
From recollection on going through the main mods, I think that's probably picked up there. So just as a sort of a general point, that would need to be a consistent approach. Yeah. And I'm not quite convinced that a development brief and a master plan does that, but let's say that's just a general point. So the underlining is additions as you would as a normal made mod.
Yeah, so the track changes with underlining and strike through is the changes from the submission version.
Okay, so that text there that's underlined is how can I say that? Agreed but not agreed, if you see what I mean.
Yes, agreed, except for in square brackets.
Yeah. Okay, and then got the point about the development brief, and then we're on to the individual criteria then. I don't have any comments on number 1 or 2. If anybody has any comments on 1 or 2, please let me know now. No, 3. I'm not convinced that criteria would be deliverable or positively prepared.
From the council's perspective, we consider it to be positively prepared because it's seeking to resolve an issue and seek a positive improvement. In terms of deliverability, no, we're not entirely convinced it's deliverable either, which is why the council's position is to delete the policy, because residential creates this problem. With residential, there would be a strong need for improvements to key facilities at the secondary school, the health facility and the rail station. if you were minded to go for what we're calling our without prejudice approach, there are potential scenarios in the future where it could be delivered, not least that it would be likely provided on the what's known as the Hamble Airfield site, which is allocated for sand and gravel extraction, but also then for restoration to open countryside with public access. So that's a long-term thing, and I would suggest it would be better to look at that in a future local plan review. But that is one potential scenario for how it could be delivered. But in terms of whether it could be financially delivered by this development, I mean, we're already casting doubt on the things that MDL are offering in terms of whether that can be financially delivered. This would add to that burden further. It's on third-party land. It would be a challenge. That's why we think that it should be, because it's a necessary piece of infrastructure with residential, and there's a question mark over delivery. That's why we consider it should be, the policy should be deleted. But at least if we went with without prejudice version, it would set a framework for the issues that needed to be resolved, and if there was an opportunity for it to be resolved through the course of a plan, then the policy would provide that hook and would support that.
Okay, sorry, can you just clarify the square brackets? Because I'm just rereading what you've said about the square brackets at page 16. So the without prejudice version set out below is agreed by MDL, except the wording, where the wording is in square brackets. This means that MDL does not agree with this wording or considers it should be inserted. So which one is it on that?
On that and on most of them, it's but they don't agree with that wording. And then if you look at Appendix 4,
that's the explanation.
It's the explanation, and quite often MDL have provided their own wording. If there's something that MDL are suggesting inserted, I think it only occurs in a couple of places. That's in Appendix 3, it actually says C in the square brackets. It says C MDL insertion.
Yeah, I've seen those ones.
But if it's otherwise in square brackets, that means that MDL don't agree with it, and they've, I believe, normally put forward their own form of wording there. Just while I'm talking, is it okay? Just, I mean, one other possibility. One other possibility in terms of modification would be simply to delete that criterion, but also delete residential. I guess that is kind of an obvious statement from the council, but just to ensure that all options are put on the table.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in you including that, you're saying that is deliverable. Then that's a deliverable criterion to the policy. That would be effective.
Well, I'm not entirely sure we are, because this is a without prejudice policy. If we thought that was clearly deliverable, it's possible. I don't know, but it's possible the council will have a different view on the whole thing. But we are concerned that isn't deliverable, which is therefore, but it is necessary, and that's why we're drawing the conclusion that the policy should be deleted. But I don't want to dwell on that, because I know you want to talk about the without prejudice version. So if you were to come to the view that residential were appropriate, we would definitely consider that it needs this criterion in it, because there was a key issue with what are essentially likely to be more vulnerable people in society, younger children or probably more elderly people going to a health centre, trying to access that on even unsafe route, or therefore they use unsustainable means to get there because the pedestrian and cycle route is unsafe. So we consider as a key requirement for it. We question whether it's deliverable, which is why we were suggesting deleting the policy. But as a halfway house, it would at least ensure that residential only came forward with the appropriate infrastructure. And whilst there's doubt over whether that could be delivered, at least it creates a framework. Local plan periods are a long time. Things can happen over that period, meaning it may be capable of delivery at some point. But that is all on the without prejudice version. So,
okay, then I think we come to this this sentence that you're suggesting, where it says a comprehensive scheme which will be required for the site which delivers all of the benefits and resolves all of the issues identified by this policy.
Yeah.
We'd be going round in a circle there, wouldn't we?
Yeah, I mean, this is an area where ourselves and MDL disagree. MDL are looking for more flexibility, and I think in a way that makes my point that we're just concerned that MDL won't be able to deliver all of these criteria, and they would all be necessary to achieve the benefits and achieve a comprehensive scheme and resolve the issues.
Okay, Mr. Packer, do you have any comments on number 3?
Yes, well, just specifically, any suggestion that this is necessary as part of a residential development, we would wholeheartedly disagree with. There are a number of reasons for this. I think first and foremost, if I can take you back to one of the background papers that was prepared. So this is HOU 11A and 11B. So this is the small and greenfield housing sites background paper assessment. I want to give you a moment to actually get that up, because I did just want to run through first and foremost the council's own evidence that was prepared as part of obviously the local plan, because I do think it's important to understand the position that the council took at that time. So can I give you some time just to?
Yeah, I think is that an appendix to one of your?
It is. If that's it, yeah. If that's easy for you.
Yes. Do you have a page number?
Appendix 11, and it starts at well, it's immediately after the end of the main report, which is page 12. This is Appendix 1, which.
Right. Sorry. Do you have a PDF page number? Only because I've got.
Yes. Bear with me.
Or if I'll put in page 12, but I doubt it'll get me to the right place.
Just getting it up on the screen. So this starts at so I think it's 13. I'm not actually getting a page number on the PDF.
Okay.
It's Appendix 1 of that document. It's not a huge document in terms of the actual text of the report. So there's 12 pages of text, and then you're straight into the appendices, and it's the first appendix. And it's Appendix 1, Transport Assessment of Small Greenfield Sites.
Right. Sorry, I'm on your. Are you in your Matter 13 statement? I'm actually on your representation.
Yes, I've got that in front of me as well.
Sorry, which one?
So I have also got the Regulation 19 representations.
Yeah. Is it an appendix to that?
Yes, Appendix 11.
Appendix 11. Okay, let's see.
And within Appendix 11, it's Appendix 1. Appendix 11 is the background paper itself.
Yeah, I've got that. June 2018.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the one. So if you just move on to going back to the page numbers within Appendix 1, if you move to page 19, so this is a list of sites that the council have assessed, just to give you some context, assessed from an accessibility perspective.
Yes. Yeah.
Sustainability perspective. So they've looked at a comparative assessment of proximity of these sites to a number of facilities, local centres, supermarkets, schools, doctors, bus services, etc. And the conclusion in respect of Site 40, now Site 40 relates to 3 separate sites, but 83C is the Mercury Marina site that was put forward by my client as part of the local plan representations. So that gets an average rating. So that was the council's assessment of the site at that time. What's of note actually in this is that there are a number of sites that have a poor rating within this list, some of which had been actually allocated. So Site 4, Site 7, Site 19, Site 26, they've all got a rating, a poor rating, so less than the rating given to the Mercury Marina site. They've all been translated into allocations. So the council's taken a view, obviously, on the accessibility of these sites and come to a conclusion that they are appropriate to allocate. Now, I appreciate there are a number of elements that come into play when you're considering allocations, but it's just of interest that when you put it in that comparative analysis perspective, that actually, you know, this doesn't perform badly, and an average rating in our view is reasonable. The other thing to note is actually there's only one site that scores a good rating in that assessment. So that's background evidence that the council have prepared themselves. The other point we wanted to make on the accessibility, and it does relate to criteria 3 as well, is that we obviously have this appeal decision for the site that sits immediately south of Mercury Marina on the south side of Satchel Lane. Now that sits, for your information, Ma'am, in Appendix. So these are the representations that we submitted to the examination session last year. And it sits in Appendix 2. And I think it's probably worthwhile just reminding you, if I may, of some of the conclusions of that inspector in relation to accessibility.
I do recall that discussion that we had last time round in relation to that appeal decision. So,
well, in which case, I'd just draw attention to that again. I mean, essentially, the inspector's position was that there are alternative walking routes that can be that are available, which extend south into Hamble Centre, where there are a number of other facilities, but also a bus stop, which would give you access to the school and the health centre and the facilities that Mr. Tucker's mentioned. So, you know, that's a conclusion that an inspector has reached in relation to the site adjacent. Clearly, you come to your own conclusions. I fully appreciate that, but I think that's, again, worth just referring to in the context of criteria 3 and this issue of the accessibility to those facilities. And as I say, you know, there are a number of other facilities in Hamble Centre. You know, the concerns that Mr. Tucker's raised is specifically in relation to the specific facilities of the school and the health centre and the railway station. Well, there are a number of other facilities in Hamble Centre that are accessible via Satchel Lane to the south. So again, that's something that we would consider is worth referencing and is relevant to consideration of whether this criteria should be deleted or not.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Tuck, anything that you'd like to add on number 3 before we move on to the next criteria?
Yes, thank you. Just briefly in response to that, Ma'am. I mean, Mr. Packer has referred to some, but not all of our evidence. How 11, he correctly says, scores the site as average. The purpose of that first document was to look at, well, ultimately 214 sites across the borough, narrowed down to 40 sites across the borough. So it was inevitably a relatively high level look at distances, and in pure distance terms, yes, he's correct. It comes out as average. But then we go on to How 12, which looked at development capacities and other local issues, and that discounted that site, including on highway grounds, and that is reflected in more detail in our latest evidence, ED80, which is flagging up the specific local concerns around the nature of Satchel Lane. And it's just worth thinking for a moment about it's a lane with, I mean, it's quite noticeable that the Paul Basham Associates appendix to MDL's evidence skates over this point. It briefly refers to the rural nature of a lane. But what we're talking about is a lane which there's physically no room to walk anywhere on it except on the main carriageway. There's no grass vert even, let alone a pavement. You've got high hedges. I've walked down that road. It's quite an unpleasant experience, especially when cars are coming, because you often don't get sight of them. You can hear them, but because of the high hedges and the bends, you can't see them. You don't know if they've seen you. It's an unlit road, and we're just concerned that, you know, looking at it practically, kids running late to school, they're going to take the shortcut, and it's an unsafe shortcut. In terms of the inspector's decision for the other Satchel Lane site, again, I won't go over that in detail because we've discussed that in the past, but there are changing circumstances now. That inspector first of all, that inspector recognised that road was dangerous and unsafe. He came to his view based on there was no policy requirement at that time for a specific route as opposed to an alternative route. We are now dealing in a policy forum, and we have a policy S1 in the local plan which requires safe access to community facilities. We also have additional evidence that the alternative routes, and clearly the other inspector knew the alternative routes were longer, they're generally over double the distance, but we now have presented to you evidence in our Appendix 1 or Appendix 2 of ED80, which is clearly showing that, not surprisingly, fewer people would choose to walk or cycle over that distance. So if they were put off the unsafe route, there would be a reduction in sustainable modes of travel, and quite a significant reduction. And finally, we've already referred to it, but the other change in circumstances, Hampshire County Council's change in position, and they are now objecting to development in the Hamble Peninsula. But just to sum up, we think this is a key point. If you're going to put 75 dwellings, which is a significant number of dwellings of this rural location in this location, yes, you can get to the village centre. There's a local minor issue of a missing pavement for the last bit, but that's in itself not a too major a point. But in terms of key local facilities, the secondary school, the health centre and the rail station, only being able to get those down an unsafe route or a route which is considerably longer is a significant disadvantage to this site, and we consider it would need to be addressed if you were minded to support residential on this site.
Okay, thank you.
Free.
Sorry, Mr. Tuck, I didn't quite hear that last bit.
Sorry, which is criterion 3. That is what would address
criterion 3, yeah.
Sorry, can I just, if you'll allow me, I'll just come back on a couple of points there. I don't think there's any suggestion that Satchel Lane route extending westwards towards the school is an appropriate route for pedestrians to walk along. I think MDL would accept that. I think the point is that there is an alternative option that's available, which Mr. Tuck has alluded to, which is to walk south along Satchel Lane to the centre of Hamble, where there is a bus stop, and the bus will take you to the school and the health centre and the railway station. So, you know, there isn't a requirement for people to walk westward along Satchel Lane to the school, but there is a realistic alternative option which combines walking and bus travel to get to those facilities, and that walking distance is an acceptable walking distance, and I think that's the point that the inspector made. So that's the first point. And just coming back to this point that Mr. Tuck's raised before about Hampshire County Council, in his words, objecting to any further development that would increase vehicle movements on Satchel Lane, I think the position of MDL's position and my reading of that alleged position is that that's not correct. I think Hampshire's position is summed up more appropriately in the Appendix 1 to the Council statement. And if I can refer you to that, Marm, and paragraph 4 in particular. So if you've got that in front of you.
Yeah.
So the very final couple of sentences, if I start, I'll just simply read it out. It is considered that increased level of vehicle use would not be acceptable unless improvement schemes were incorporated of the form being considered by HCC in the preferred scheme for Hamble Lane. Therefore, if it is considered this site is deemed suitable for residential development, Hampshire County Council would seek contributions from the developer towards elements of the Hamble Lane preferred scheme. That is my reading of their position. And as I said, we said earlier, I think my client, within reason, would be happy to provide contributions towards those improvements, provided that they were proportionate and reasonable in accordance with the guidance in the NPPF. So I don't believe Mr. Tuck's statement is correct that Hampshire County Council are objecting, in principle, to schemes that generate additional traffic on Satchel Lane and which feed into those junctions that obviously they've referred to.
Mr. Tuck, is it a new point?
Yes, it is. First of all, on the alternative route via the suggestion that people are going to walk, getting onto a mile down to a village centre, to rely on a 2 bus an hour service to then double back and go in the other direction. We just don't think it's a very likely outcome at all. We think people either take the shortcut. Teenagers may take the shortcut and risk that route, or they will more likely go by unsustainable means. In other words, they'll be driven there, which detracts from the sustainability of the site. Just in terms of the second point, and Mr. Packer suggesting I was incorrect in my summary of the County Council's position, it's probably better if I just read out the key point in their statement. So I'm looking at EDAT Appendix 2, which is the report I referred to earlier, which is the report. It's paragraph 3.2 of that, and perhaps the last sentence is a key one, which reads, so I'll just wait until you've got that.
I've got 3.2, yeah.
So the last sentence says, therefore, at least until the preferred scheme for the northern section has been implemented, it is considered inappropriate from a traffic perspective for further development to be allocated or permitted along Hamble Lane. And the County Council have added in their appendix statement to our hearing statement that they wouldn't have counted HA2 even in its submitted version as an emerging policy in their technical assessment of this scheme. So it's a new site from their perspective, and they object whatever you want to refer to. They're saying at least until the preferred scheme is implemented, it is considered inappropriate from a traffic perspective for further development to be allocated or permitted along Hamble Lane.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tuck. Mrs. Sparks, is this a new point on bullet point 3?
I just wanted to add just a little bit of clarity. So Graham mentioned the connections to local bus service. They actually run twice a day, only on weekdays. So they're not an hourly service. It's 2 buses, one at 9:45 and one at 12:45. So it wouldn't particularly be an attractive connection for commuters headed up to the train station, for example. Just wanted to make that point.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I think we'll have a short break now. So that's when we come back, we'll move on to look at bullet point 4. I make it 11:20. So if we have a break until 11:30, if everybody's okay with that, they do not log off. You just simply, well, you're all muted with the cameras off anyway, but just leave it like that, and then the hearing will resume at 11:30. Thank you. Okay, it's 11:30. The hearing is resumed. Can I just check, Mr. Tucker, have you returned, and Mr. Packer?
Yes, I'm here, Mum.
Thank you.
Yes, likewise.
Thank you.
Sorry, just before we start on 4, can I just go back? I didn't get a chance to respond to the comments from the council about the bus service. If I just can refer you to, so this is Appendix 12. This is the Paul Basham Associates report that was submitted with the representation of the Regulation 19 representations. And in that report, it actually does set out the bus services that were available at the time, admittedly, but we have just checked. And can I just refer you to paragraph 2.19 of that report, Appendix 12. And essentially, it's just confirming that there is a bus service that operates from Hamble Square. It's the Southampton Red bus. It connects through to Southampton City Centre. It runs every half an hour, Monday to Friday. So there is a good service that connects from Hamble to Southampton, and it runs via Hamble Lane, and there is a bus stop immediately outside the school, which also sits very close to the railway station as well.
Right, so which is correct? It can't be that far apart on a bus service.
Well, as I say, Ma'am, we've just checked online, and the information online is up to date, or should be up to date, and that's showing a half-hourly service Monday to Friday.
I don't know if Callie wants to come. Yeah, Callie wants to come in, or I mean, I think my general point. I mean, I must admit, my understanding was it was a bus every half hour. I don't know if there's an additional service which may be more infrequent, or a school bus service. But I mean, I think my general point remains that I think it's very unlikely that people are going to walk down almost a mile to the bus stop, wait for up to half an hour for a once every half hour bus, to then double back and go the other way. They'll either take the unsafe route or they'll jump in the car.
Right.
That's the point I've made. So.
Okay, but which is correct? It's a basic thing of a bus service. So which one's right?
If I may. So
yes, please.
Sorry, there is a City Red bus service which runs every half hour into Southampton.
Right. Okay.
The service I was talking about is a local service that runs as a shopper service along a route up to Bursledon and Hedge End.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. Okay, let's move on then, please, because I don't think this.
I'm sorry, I apologise for interrupting again. Just one final point on this before we move on, and that's we haven't talked about cycle connections. And again, that is set out within the Paul Basham Associates report. There's a specific section on them. So I just refer you to that simply. There is a cycle footway which is called the Danny King route, which again provides a connection, admittedly south, but there is a dedicated cycleway, named cycleway, that provides a connection southwards to the school as well. So that's another option that's available for pupils to access the school.
Yeah. Okay, and then as drafted between yourselves, the policy would be looking to achieve a dedicated new footpath and cycleway, so it would be both.
That's certainly the council's position, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, but again, Mark, as we said before, that we certainly from MDL's perspective, we consider that is not necessary for the reasons given before, as you'll be aware.
Yes, I've noted that. Thank you. Okay, so number 4. So we're looking to change from, this is what confused me, because it's a different wording from the Reg 19 one, but it's not, you haven't, you've changed the where feasible, but you haven't annotated that here. So previously it was the site retains and where feasible enhances the existing amount.
Sorry, are we talking about the holiday accommodation criteria?
Sorry, yes, I am. Yeah.
Well, in
sorry, no, so this is now 2, isn't it? So it's previously 2, is now 4.
In the statement of common ground, the 4 is the site retains enhanced marina and related uses, and the deletion in the council's version of a holiday accommodation is a deletion of criterion 7.
That's right. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. So site retains and enhances the marina and related uses, including marine employment. Okay, any comments on 4?
Not from a council's perspective. I think this criterion is agreed between us.
Okay, and Mr. Coombs, I know that you don't have the statement of common ground necessarily to hand, but can I just read out for your benefit what little 4 would say?
Yep.
Yeah, so at the moment, both the main parties here are suggesting that would say the site retains and enhances the marina and related uses, including marine employment, the sail and canoe training facilities, facilities for other water sports and visitor facilities. So that would, in my view, encompass the retain and enhancement that the Sea Scouts, can't pronounce that, have been concerned about.
Yeah, indeed. Is that for sole use of the Hamble Sea Scouts, or is that for use by the Amazon Sea Scouts as well?
Sorry, I'm having difficulty hearing you. I don't know if other people are, if it's just me. You're quite muffled. Mr. Tuck, can you hear Mr. Coombs?
I can, but it's the same issue. It is muffled.
Okay. Do you want? Sorry, could you just repeat that, Mr. Coombs?
Yeah. Sorry. Is that point referring to sole use for Hamble Sea Scouts, or for use with the Amazon Sea Scouts as well? Can you hear me now?
It doesn't specify, so it would include everybody.
Okay. Yeah, that answers our point there. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. And then we have sorry, Mr. Tuck, did you have any comment to make on number 4?
No, I don't think so.
No. Okay. Then on to 5, a new 5, which should be the provision of a public right of way set out as a formal path in accordance with criteria 8. Can you just tell me the background to this?
Yes, so the mound, as you'll be aware, Ma'am, is the sink for woodland site of importance and nature conservation to the southwest of the southeast of the site. It is an alternative, potentially an alternative route through to join up with some a small housing estate, which then takes you onto Satchel Lane. At the moment, it's a very informal route. It's basically this time of year a very muddy path, a drier path in the summer, of course. It comes out at a gate onto the Marina car park, I believe, well, certainly my 2 site visits, once it was locked, once it was unlocked. So it's used as an informal route at MDL's discretion, and you know, we make it quite clear on signage that it's at their discretion at the moment. It's not a public right of way at the moment, but it is a well appreciated route from local residents, because when the gate is open, it does enable a pleasant route through the woods on the edge of the shore to the marina waterfront. This criterion is agreed between us, so it's an offer from MDL to formalise that in terms of the legal public right of way. The other thing to bear in mind is, of course, that there's a nature conservation issue here. Now, there is a potential benefit in that the path can be essentially relocated away from the shoreline to avoid recreational disturbance of birds on the shoreline, but also, no doubt, the design of a poor path. You know, we're not talking about tarmac paths with lighting. We'd be talking about a informal but managed route to be appropriate and consistent to the nature conservation designation.
Okay.
Maybe worth adding, it isn't a shorter route to the district, the village centre. Sorry, it's effectively equidistant from the site as if you were walking down Satchel Lane. So it'd be more of a recreational benefit of being able to walk through the woods and onto the waterfront.
Is there any reason it's a separate criterion? Why wouldn't you just include the public right of way set out as a formal path within number 8?
I don't think there is a particular reason. I wouldn't have any problem with it being incorporated as part of 8.
Okay.
Likewise, Ma'am, just for clarity, wouldn't have an issue with that. That seems very sensible. Just on the point of the formal connection, I think what this does do is just demonstrate again improved connectivity, albeit on an informal basis, with the residential area to the south, improved accessibility to the water environment, and obviously with a view to the HA2 modifications as put forward by MDL. Again, the intention is this becomes a regenerated area that's very attractive for people to come and visit. So, you know, providing that walking route, that connectivity with the existing built-up area will, we think, encourage people to come and visit the site, the facilities that are there as improved, and generally, again, going back to the overall strategy aims of the plan, that's very much aligned with those. So there is yes, there's a benefit in terms of obviously the formal provision of the route, but there's a wider point in terms of connectivity and the activity and the investment within the site that would be generated potentially by the local community visiting it more often.
Okay. Thank you for that, Mr. Packer. Then, sorry, Mr. Tack, do you have anything else to add on that?
Well, maybe just briefly. I mean, it doesn't need 75 dwellings to open the gate. It would still be an informal route. I acknowledge the recreational benefits, but yeah, I'll leave it like that.
Okay. Then we're on to new 6, which was number 3. Is that right? Was previously number 3 in the Reg 19 plan. Mr. Tuck, are you able to clarify that?
Apologies, Ma'am, I was unintentionally on mute. Yes, that is correct.
Okay. So no change there.
No.
And then 7 is then deleted.
Yes, in the council's version.
And this is a square bracket, so this is MDL don't agree.
Correct.
Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, simply that the holiday accommodation is relocated onto the lower part of Chamberlain's Field, which is as set out in the master plan, which is part of the Reg 19 submissions by MDL. So it obviously provides the opportunity of re-providing the holiday accommodation in that area. And providing a better quality experience of holiday accommodation with obviously the lodges that are proposed.
So this, sorry, is this the TUV area? Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. Okay. So in the context of the site area as shown, this perhaps one for Mr. Tuck. What was that criteria doing in the original policy then?
Sorry, just bear with me. The council doesn't have an issue with holiday accommodation per se. It's that in providing the 75, and therefore, you know, it's there at the moment, and we were happy for it to be retained there. The issue for us is that by providing 75 dwellings, and an additional problem with that 75 dwellings is it means that the holiday accommodation needs to be relocated into an area which is settlement gap. So the deletion in the policy, as we put, is simply the difference between us is whether that area should be the allocation should include the settlement gap and therefore allow holiday accommodation in the settlement gap.
Yeah, so let's take a step back to HA2 as it appeared in the Reg 19 plan. That criteria was there, criteria 4.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what was it? How did it relate to the existing context of the site aside from the settlement gap and relocating point? What was it trying to do?
I think it was simply recognising that as part of at that time the approach to providing holiday accommodation on the site, a hotel, and retaining the existing holiday accommodation, that was part of a mix on offer, and we were seeking to retain it within the site boundaries at that time.
Right, so why is that no longer applicable, aside from the hotel point?
Because there isn't a physical capacity. It's not so much that it isn't an applicable point. The hotel, the caravan holiday accommodation is of benefit to the tourist industry, clearly. It's more the physical practicality that by putting 75 dwellings there, that could only be accommodated by, well, you can't accommodate that 75 dwellings and the holiday accommodation on the site boundary as defined by the council. There isn't physically the room for all of that and a marina, so something has to get deleted.
Right, okay. So just so I'm clear, Mr. Packer, then is your MDL don't agree on the basis that you would need to have the site area extended?
Yes, essentially, I think Mr. Tuck's point is correct. There's a point about the residential capacity of the site, but we're comfortable that the 75 works in our view from a viability perspective. So yes, it would relate to relocation to the other side of the access road onto Chamberlain's Field. I suppose the only other point I'd make is that, again, as you've alluded to, the council were obviously keen to see some improvements to the holiday accommodation as part of the submission plan. But again, these need to be delivered, and they can only be delivered with a viable scheme. And in our view, that viable scheme is what is being put forward as part of the MDL proposal and the modifications that we're suggesting. So yes, the benefits can be delivered in terms of improvements and enhancements to the holiday accommodation, but they need to come with a mixed-use scheme that includes some residential. There was just another point on this, and I don't know whether it's appropriate to deal with it now, but it's just a point about the gap and the location of the holiday accommodation within the gap.
Yeah, well, I'm happy for you to. I know the point that you're trying to make, but I'm happy for you to do that if you would like to do so. Mr. Tuck, can I just clarify then, in deleting that and the reference that you have to the range of a holiday accommodation within the first part of the policy, where does that leave the site overall then in terms of that function that it provides?
Well, there would, in that scenario, there would be, if the only way of providing the housing was to lose the holiday accommodation, that would be an additional slight disbenefit of the housing. The site could be allocated without housing and still enable the enhancement of the caravan park. I mean, that is a commercial operation, and if there was a demand for that to happen, it'll happen. So by putting housing there, you're creating either a problem of holiday accommodation including into the settlement gap, or a problem of a loss of holiday accommodation with the tourist benefit of that.
But in terms of the changes that you're putting forward to the policy, so just confirm to me that the square brackets on the first part where it's deleted a range of holiday accommodation, is that that's an MDL doesn't agree, is it? So you want to delete the holiday accommodation?
I mean, from it's a council suggesting the holiday accommodation is deleted more as a practical reality, and bearing in mind all of this is without prejudice, so it's not something the council is actively trying to delete the holiday park. It's simply a logical consequence of the council's position that the site boundary should remain as it is, and there's no physical capacity for both.
Yeah, okay, I've understood that point. Mr. Packer, I don't want to go into too much detail on the settlement gap point because I think I've understood it fully from the representations, but I'm happy if you want to, if there's anything particular you want to summarise to me. But as I say, I've read the those particular points in detail on that.
No, understood, Marn. In which case, I'll be brief. So you'll have seen that in the representations that we made to the Reg 19 plan, the references again to the assessment of the site in terms of its role in the gap and the conclusion that the council have come to. I'll leave that. You have that information. I guess what's new is the council's evidence that's been prepared on the gaps across the district, and in particular the reference to the parcel that's assessed, which includes this site. So if that's okay, can I run through a couple of points on that?
Yes, you may. Yeah.
So this is ED 84. And it's a settlement gap study. Within that document, there are obviously references to the parcel that includes the site. there's also wider references in terms of Satchel Lane. So on page 14, I'll just read the references. Page 14 of that document, it refers to Satchel Lane, and it specifically says a sense of arrival at the settlement is not experienced until the junction to Mercury Boatyard, at which point the settlement reverts to housing and ribbon development. So you read that and it would suggest actually your sense of arrival at the settlement is corresponds to your arrival at the access to the marina site. But then, as you'll be aware, the assessment goes on to look at the specific parcel that includes the site, and this is parcel A64, which is on page 27. And we are dealing with, in terms of the site within that parcel, it is just that area that sits in the southeast corner.
Yeah.
So just bear that in mind. So it refers to this as being visually contained by mature woodland and rural lane vegetation along Satchel Lane. So again, there's a suggestion of some containment there, and that the field falls steeply towards the River Hamble, providing views to the holiday village. So again, a kind of visual connection with the existing holiday village. But it then goes on to suggest that actually this parcel does perform all of the roles in the gap that are assessed. And I think it's that we have a difficulty with. You'll have seen obviously the separate landscape visual assessment that's been prepared as part of the Reg 19 representations as well. So that the concerns that are raised within the report that's been prepared by the council relate to the openness of the gap at this point. But I'd say I'm trying to rationalise that in my head with the conclusion that actually it's contained by the woodland to the north and vegetation along Hamble Lane. So how open it is, I'm not sure. Also, that it contributes to the character of Hamble as it's adjacent to the Hamble Marina. Again, I'm not quite sure exactly why those references are in there. I'm not quite sure what purpose that has in terms of gap function. Perhaps more importantly, it refers to the fact that it contributes to separation from the cluster of developments around Hamble School. Well, clearly it doesn't, because there is quite some distance, as you'll be aware, between this part of the parcel and those facilities. There are a number of fields that sit between the two.
Sorry, Mr. Packer, I think we've lost you there. Louise, can I just check whether Mr. Packer is still online? Can anybody hear me?
I can hear you, Mum.
Yeah.
I can't hear him. Okay.
Okay, I think we've probably lost him, it looks like.
Inspector, we have. I can't see him in the list of people who are currently in the meeting.
Okay,
So,
we'll just hold on for a minute and see if he manages to rejoin.
Yes. I don't know whether, Paul, are you there?
I am still here, yeah.
That's lovely. So if he comes into the meeting, could you please let him in again?
Absolutely, not a problem at all.
So I don't think I can do that.
That's fine, I'll do that. I'll keep an eye out when he rejoins.
I don't think I've got an email yet from him saying, oh, there he is, he's back.
Apologies for that. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can, yeah.
Yeah, sorry about that. Entirely my fault. I hadn't turned the power socket on, so my laptop patches. So yes, just going back to this latest report, the gap study report. I think I got as far as to just running through some of the key conclusions, and particularly this point about the separation from the cluster of buildings around Hamble School, which was alleged as a concern. As I say, there is significant distance between this part of the parcel and that cluster of buildings. There are a number of fields between the two, and obviously this is on lower lying land, so visually there is no connection between the two. So our view, which is set out in the landscape and visual appraisal within the Reg 19 representations, is actually this plays a minimal role in the gap function. So I think it's just understanding that yes, the lodges are within a part of the gap as currently within the submitted plan, but in our view, the role of that gap is on this part of the site at least is very limited. And indeed, again, I could go back to the representations, but I won't, because you'll have them in front of you. The actual assessment that the council undertook had the very similar conclusions in their say part of the evidence paper in assessing small and medium-sized greenfield sites.
Okay, thank you for that.
Could I just very briefly respond to that, please?
You can respond, Mr. Tuck, but I don't want to go into reams of detail on the settlement gaps work.
Absolutely, that's understood. Just on the last point first, the small and medium greenfield sites, the average conclusion we got there was for the whole site, most of which is not in the settlement gap, so it should be seen in that context. In terms of the latest evidence, we consider that the site, the entrance to the village is part of a point. That is the entrance to the village. That is the perception of it.
Mr. Tuck, I think you've logged out as well, or it's frozen. Can anybody hear Mr. Tuck?
No, I've lost him as well. He's frozen on the screen.
Inspector, I think he'll probably need to log in again.
Okay.
I don't know, Graham, if you can hear me, you might need to log out and come back in again to the meeting.
Apologies, the same thing happened to it. Well, not the same thing happened to me, but lost my connection as well. Yeah, sorry, I was just finishing. We recognise the point about containment with the woodland, but it's the rural nature of the lane and the pressure which the settlement gap is already under, with the historic nature of the school and the health centre being there. So I think they're the key points we'd like you to consider alongside that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So on to number 7, the new number 7, what isn't new, but 7 in the context of your new appendix. So that is just repeated from the original. Is it about the nature conservation point, number 7?
Yeah, the northern shores. Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. And same on number 8, bearing in mind the comments that we've already noted about the linkage with number 5.
Yeah,
and
so
then,
that's firstly. Yeah.
Sorry.
No, just agreeing. Correct.
Okay, and then 9 and 10. So these are changes that you do both agree on.
Yes.
I think 9 is self-explanatory. 10, footpath links within the site eastwards. Could you just confirm to me where that would be?
I think this was a point originally suggested by MDL, but so I'll hand over to Mr. Packer. Other than I believe it was just connecting from within the site to the footpath number 1, but perhaps Mr. Packer's best able to.
So the southeast.
Yeah, that's right. Mr. Tuck is right. So going back to the master plan within the Reg 19 missions, this is item V on that plan. So you'll see there's a footpath connection that extends parallel with the access road into the marina, and then westward to the extreme southwest of the site. And it's at that point that you on the opposite side of the road there is footpath number 1, which is the Strawberry Trail. So it's providing an option for an informal route through the site to the Strawberry Trail. I appreciate, again, it is informal, but nonetheless it is another connection, footpath connection through to southwards to Hambourne and the facilities.
So sorry, is that criteria then only if the site area is extended?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and sorry, are the east and the southeast correct then in there? Eastwards towards Strawberry Hill Trail to the southeast.
No, apologies. So it's westwards and southwest.
Right, yeah. So sorry, Mr. Tuck, just so I'm clear then, should that not be a square bracketed? The counts, sorry, have you frozen again, or can you hear me okay? Mr. Tuck.
Inspector, I think he's frozen again.
Right, okay.
Once again, he'll need to come out and rejoin the meeting.
Apologies, Ma'am, I dropped out again. I heard up until Mr. Packer clarifying the directions should be southwest.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Is it, sorry, do you think it's an ongoing problem, or do you think it's just a?
I'm not sure, to be honest. It's generally the Wi-Fi at home is pretty good. It just occasionally drops out a little bit, and it unfortunately is now. So fingers crossed is all I can say, I think.
Okay, that's fine. What I was saying was, if that's only applicable, number 10, if the site area is extended, then is that not is that a criteria that needs a sort of council health warning with it, as in you're only content with it if the site area is extended?
Yes, I think that's correct.
Yeah. Okay, and then 11 CMDL, where do I go for that?
That will be in Appendix 4.
Do you have a page number? Oh, here we go. Is it 26?
I suspect it is. Oh yes, I think this is, Mr. Packer will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is MDL suggested addition about Badham Copse is safeguarded from potential disturbance and light or noise.
Yeah, that's correct. It was just simply to provide some more comfort if needed in terms of the relationship of the site and the policy as modified to Badnam Creek sink.
Okay.
So the references are, as Mr. Tucker's explained in Appendix 4.
Yeah. Okay, understood that. And then we're back on track with the amenity protection, which was an existing criterion. And then the flood risk, which was also existing. And then we've got this sentence about a comprehensive scheme will be required for the site which delivers all of the benefits and resolves all of the issues. So that's not square bracketed. So Mr. Packer, are you then, in terms of the ones that we've talked through, are you saying that you're content with that text? For example, if things like number 3 are included.
No, it is square bracketed.
It is. Sorry.
It's not easy.
You're right. Yeah. No.
It's just underlined as well. No, we don't feel that's a reasonable approach.
So that whole text is square bracketed.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Could I? Sorry, Mum, could I just make one suggestion at that point?
Yeah.
I'm not sure this will lead to agreement, but just another option the council could consider is if there was no residential and therefore obviously no requirement for a footpath, then the planning balance would change again, so that there may be some flexibility around whether absolutely everything was required if we weren't having the disbenefits of the housing as seen from the council's perspective. Now, I'm sure that doesn't address MDL's concerns, but I just thought I should put it out there as another potential way to modify the policy. But yeah, if there is the housing there, well, you understand that point. If there is the housing there, we consider all of the issues should be addressed.
Okay.
I'll just perhaps elaborate on this a little bit from MDL's perspective. I think it's almost implying that it's holding MDL to ransom, that you have to deliver in the eyes of the council all of the benefits and resolve all of the issues. Well, as part of any planning application, obviously we'll need to demonstrate evidence to show where we are responding to criteria and where we aren't, if needed. Now, I'm not suggesting that we don't, but as part of any evidence gathering to support a planning application, there may well be a need for some flexibility, but that can really only be apparent once you delve further into the detail. So I think as it's worded, as I say, it reads like a ransom And I think MDL are concerned that any application that did come forward would fail potentially as a consequence, because we're not being given the flexibility to seek to address some of the criteria which may or may not wholly be appropriate at the time.
Okay, noted, Mr. Packer. Then we're on to 6.2.57, and we've got the cross-reference to retaining and enhancing the training facilities. And then you go on to talk about delivering enhanced workshops for the marine economy and for visitors. Anything that you'd like to add on that?
I think I believe that's all agreed. So from the council's perspective,
okay.
nothing to add.
We've got 6.2.58 italics. Is that something?
Apologies, I don't think there's any significance to the italics. So that is simply a new addition which is agreed between the two parties.
And that's the cross-reference to DM11.
Yes.
An amendment to the criterion A.
Yes, I believe that was just a grammatical correction.
Yeah. And then this is specifics in terms of the biodiversity enhancements. This new text on page 20.
That's correct, yes.
Do you want to talk me through the square bracketed points on here?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, first of all, as a general point, this is where the council is, or without prejudice, where we're seeking to ensure that all the benefits either being proposed by MDL or which our own consultants have spotted are needed to ensure a comprehensive approach to net biodiversity are secured. In terms of the square brackets, I think there were two, I'm just double checking, yeah, there were two issues. The one around the salt marsh and the one around the roofs. I wonder, could I bring in Mr. Pinkham first of all, our ecology consultant, just to talk briefly around the ecology issues and benefits from achieving those? Would that be acceptable?
Sorry, so these are square bracketed. MDL don't agree, but you think they're necessary. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So, so who did you want to bring in? Just
Mr. Pinkham, the habitat consultant.
Yeah. Can he just talk specifically though about those 2 points of the supporting text?
Thank you, Ma'am. Yes, very happy to, thank you. So the two issues that are raised here are the extent to which salt marsh could be allowed to expand under natural processes along the northern shore, and whether or not it's possible or desirable to close public access to the retained pontoons, which, in case you're unaware, that's location point B on the illustrative master plan as proposed by MDL.
Thank you.
So the extent of hard standing removal that's needed to facilitate the salt marsh expansion has been queried by MDL, and I think they appear to have understood that we think that all of the hard standing should be removed. The policy as proposed, or the policy amendments as proposed by Eastleigh Borough Council, doesn't specify how much hard standing should be removed. But MDL's concept plan or illustrative master plan shows that the hard standing in areas A and C would be removed and converted to what looks like it may be grassland type habitat. We've kind of agreed that that's an appropriate area over which hard standing should be removed, but we're suggesting that it would be preferable from an ecological point of view to allow reversion to salt marsh under natural processes, which would be commensurate with the adjacent SSI, SAC and SPA. But we also, in our Appendix 4 to ED80, we stated that we're sort of open to the fact that grassland habitat might be preferred, provided that it is carefully selected maritime seed mix, for example, a dune grassland, rather than just, formal landscape amenity grassland.
Yep. Okay.
But in reality, some combination of the salt marsh and the suitable grassland habitat would probably provide a satisfactory enhancement, particularly if salt marsh was allowed to revert to cover area A and a suitable grassland habitat was chosen for area C.
Okay, I've noted that. And then on the closing public access to but retaining pontoons, that's area B, did you say?
Yeah, that's area B. So, I mean, obviously the surrounding SSI and SPA are notified for their populations of waders, wintering waders and other wildfowl. Waders in particular are known to use floating pontoons as roost sites at high water or during inclement weather. And what we've suggested is that in order to maximise the ecological benefits commensurate with the surrounding designations, it would be appropriate to close either totally or in part, or perhaps restrict public access to the pontoons in order to ensure that the ecological benefits are fully realised. MDL has raised in its statement that this would be in conflict with the operational aspirations of the wider site, which rather makes Eastleigh's point on its behalf, which is that there are conflicts between the ecological benefits and the operational aspirations.
Sorry, I'm not sure this sentence makes sense. Relocation of houseboats where appropriate and possible, and restricted managed access to activity areas. Are you saying that the second closing public access to but retaining pontoons as roost, that sentence doesn't make sense without that, does it?
I think, I'm not sure, I think they're two separate points. There's the relocation of the houseboats where possible. Maybe
where
use
appropriate. Where appropriate and possible.
Yeah, it should perhaps, does it help if there's a semicolon after that? And then there's a new point, and closing public access to but retaining pontoons, because the pontoons need to be retained for the roost, but closing public access to them.
And closing public access to pontoons. I'm not sure. I think it might be the second and. Relocation of houseboats where appropriate and possible. Restricted, managed. Yes. Yeah. Is it the second and?
Yeah, I think so. Apologies, that should just be deleted, I think.
Yeah, I think if the square bracket included and.
Yeah, or that's right. I'll have that included. Yeah. And possible restricted managed access. Okay. So who uses this area at the moment?
Well, this might be one actually that Christy can help with a little bit more, but I understand that it is accessible to the Sea Scouts. It is accessible to the berth holders that use that pontoon as well. There is, I guess at the moment, there's nothing that would necessarily stop the public from accessing that area as well. But I think the point being that there is an opportunity to try and manage the environment a little bit better through providing some information to ensure that the access is as limited as it can be. And obviously the roosting potential wouldn't be there unless the pontoons were there. So you know, the pontoons are there for the berth holders to use and the Sea Scouts to use. So there's a bit of a circle going on here. They need to be there for the operation of the marina or elements of it, and the fact that they're there is providing roosts.
Okay, sorry, thank you for that. Mr. Coombs, do you use this area at the moment?
Yeah, yes, we do, yes. Yeah, I was just going to confirm what Ms. Packer was saying there. Yes, we use it quite frequently.
Sorry, could you just elaborate slightly what sorts of activities and generally, regularly or infrequently?
So we launch boats off of the slipway site. We've got a launch currently moored on the pontoon site there.
Okay.
And we so we basically use it as a launching point.
So how does that fit then, Mr. Tuck, with what you're proposing in biodiversity terms?
I'm sorry, Ma'am, I dropped out again to about 2
Oh,
minutes.
okay. They use it at the Sea Scouts use it as a launching point regularly, I think. That's what Mr. Coombs is saying.
Yeah, I mean, I think on this one, from an ecology perspective, clearly it would be better if the pontoon wasn't used at all. But from a marina point of view, obviously people do need access to the boats. So I think there is a halfway house here. I think what we'd be looking for is, and I'm not quite sure the wording is right even in our without prejudice version yet, but it's a limited and managed access, or if there's an opportunity to close some of the pontoon and keep some of it open. My understanding is one of the benefits MDL was suggesting was that obviously for the restoration of the slipway, although it is there at the moment, enables the activity to be focused on the slipway, which, as I understand it, is slightly less environmentally sensitive, a little bit further away from the northern shore. So I think, clearly people need to get access to the boats on the pontoon, but I think that should be a limited and managed approach, and the detail of that will come out for the development management discussion. But I think what we're trying to avoid is a practical way forward is 20 or 30 people all coming onto that pontoon, be it 20 Sea Scouts or 20 adults or whoever it may be. I think it needs to be a managed approach to deliver that environmental enhancement.
Mr. Pinkham, I'm just going to ask a question of the council, and perhaps you can answer this then. So these criteria that you're relating it to are not new, are they? They're in the Regulation 19 version, is that right?
That is correct, yes, Mark.
Yeah, so why is this text now necessary?
Because I think it relates back to our concern that actually it's going to be challenging to deliver all of this, in either financial or perhaps in this case particularly operational reasons, and so we want to be specific in order for the plan to be effective in establishing what does need to be delivered to achieve a comprehensive approach which delivers biodiversity net gain.
Mr. Pinkham, is it a new point?
It was really just to add some further detail to the idea of restricted access along the pontoon and the existing use of it by the Sea Scouts and others. In our view, probably the best outcome for the northern extremity of the site would be salt marsh, as we said, in Area A, and then a partial closure of the pontoon at the northern end, and possible relocation of the slipway that leads onto the pontoon. which would provide a sort of nice area of remote habitat in the northern part of the site. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Roger?
Hello, yes, good morning, Mum. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I only wanted to say that our customers have contracts to use that pontoon. So, and I personally don't have access to all existing contracts. So I don't know how feasible it is to actually terminate any contracts and move people on. I honestly don't have the answer to that right now. So I would question whether it's reasonably deliverable to just close the pontoon. I'm not sure that it would be immediately.
Okay.
I just
Thank you for that.
add to that I mean, clearly it's an activity that is being undertaken at the moment. People are using the pontoon at the moment. I appreciate that there is an opportunity to review and explore, but in terms of ecological enhancements, but you know, obviously that has to be factored into the operational elements. But I don't see them as conflicting, as perhaps the council is suggesting. I think there is a way through this, just that will improve the management of the site in a way that will benefit the specific points that the council are making in terms of the northern shore and the pontoon. So, you know, there will be improvements relative to the existing position, but as you'll appreciate, that there's an operational function to the marina that's being undertaken at the moment. You've heard from the Sea Scouts as well. So it has to be a balanced approach. These are elements that can be discussed and agreed, I'm sure, through any subsequent development management application.
Sorry, Mr. Pinkham, is your hand still up from earlier, or is it a new point?
Apologies, Mum.
No, okay, fine, thank you. Okay, I've noted all the comments in relation to that suggested supporting text there. And then 6.2.59 is as was, and then 6.2.60. You've made some minor changes there. Is that right?
Sorry, Mum, was that directed at me again? Dropped out for a couple of minutes.
I'm just doing the last two paragraphs here. So 6.2.59, I said that's as existing Reg 19 plan, and then 6.2.60, you've made a couple of minor changes to.
Yes.
Is that correct? Yeah.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you then confirm that there's no change to plans.
I'm sorry, Ivor. Could you repeat that last point, please? It was breaking up.
Yeah, I had
Sorry.
this issue. Yeah, it was breaking up. Just
I do apologise. Can you hear me now?
Yes, much clearer.
Yeah.
I leave to hear me this time.
yeah, yeah.
Sorry, I'm getting some error messages up. Can you still hear me now?
Yes, clearly, yes.
Yes.
Sorry, I just said that then you've made a final comment about the policies map and that's as shown on the submission version.
From the council's perspective, yes, that's right.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Okay, I think that concludes those comments then. Is there anything in addition to what we've already covered today that you would like to raise with me? I mean, I think there's a lot, obviously, got the various statements and the council's view and the views of the representatives who are here and who've made written representations. So I will be taking all those into account. Is there anything before preparing or finalising the main modifications to go with the schedule that you've already prepared? Is there anything additional that you want to draw my attention to in relation to policy HA2, or anything further that you would like to discuss in relation to the policy that we've not covered?
From the council's perspective, unless anyone in my team says otherwise, no, I think we've had a good discussion and yeah, covered all the points.
Mr. Packer.
Thank you, Ma'am. Yes, just a couple of very brief points, if I may, which goes back to this approach to soundness that the council are taking, weighing up the planning balance and coming down in favour of deletion. So I made the point before about the need for one of the soundness tests being the plan should be positively prepared. I don't see this as being positive for the reasons given. I think deletion is a step in the wrong direction. Our view is obviously the benefits of delivery of a comprehensive scheme far outweigh any disbenefits such as they are. I think probably the only final point that perhaps hasn't been made in the representation, certainly not directly, is this point about a large part or proportion of the site being previously developed land, brownfield land. And in accordance with national policy, there is encouragement to make, and this is the 2012 version, of course, there is encouragement to make efficient use of that land. And that would include residential. So if we're looking at those soundness tests, positively prepared would be in our view, would be a modified policy in accordance with that put forward by MDL. And that approach in terms of making good use of the brownfield land within the site, again, is consistent with national policy. There are other points there that relate to obviously the recreational aspects as well, and delivering those advantages, and also the points again about exploiting the marine heritage of the area, which the modifications would also deliver. So just an additional point really about the previously developed land and as I say, the consistency with national policy, making good use of that land. Okay,
thank you for that.
Can I, sorry, just very briefly on those points. Well, first of all, perhaps just to reiterate, we do see this possibly a halfway house in modifying the policy to exclude the residential and the footpath and introduce the flexibility of DM20. So I think the council would be content with that. The key issue is the residential for the council, and it's strong objection to that. Previously developed land, well, you've got our points on that. Some of the land is previously developed, some isn't. But in any case, we think it's unsuitable for the reasons we've discussed. Perhaps for one point, I should just offer, we haven't discussed too much a viability point. I'm content to leave it to what's in our written statement if that's satisfactory for yourself, Ma'am. Just to reiterate point that we are concerned that in any case, we don't think 75 residential dwellings will deliver all the benefits being offered for financial viability reasons, and the reasons of that are set out in our statement. Thank you, Ma'am.
Thank you. Mr. Coombs, can I check you don't have anything further to add before I look to close the session?
No, nothing further to add, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, as I said, I will thank you for today's discussion. That's been extremely helpful. I'll take away all the comments I've heard today and the written representations, and will formulate a view accordingly, which will then be reflected in the main modifications. Mr. Tuckty, sorry, you're about to speak.
No.
No,
Oh, sorry.
okay, thank you. So I'll look to close the hearing session now. Thank you for everybody who's attended and those who have contributed. Miss St John Howe will be in contact with how the examination will progress in terms of the main modifications. So that concludes today's hearing session, and the hearing is now closed. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.